Good afternoon, my dear friends. My dear respected ones, I welcome all of you back to the discussion. Now, in this video, I'll be giving you some hints on the topic language forms or different forms of language. Each language has got different forms. On the basis of the language used by different people, it can be categorized into different forms. The two broad categories are formal form of language and informal form of language. Formal form of language is the standard version of a language which is always used in educational institutions, in formal offices, and for publishing newspapers, journals, and such publications. Informal language is the language which is used by people in their day-to-day life activities. This day-to-day life language also is known as kitchen language. In formal language, you can see some lofty usages and sophisticated terms. But in informal language, people use simple words and some colloquial usages. This informal form of language can be other forms such as dialects and idiolects. Dialects are the language forms or versions of language which is used by some people who are residing at a particular locality. They may be using different words and phrases on the basis of the local culture and customs. Idiolects are the language forms or the versions of a particular language used by some individuals. It may be because of his physical problems or faulty concepts of language. Some individuals use some awkward sentences and rare usages when speaking in a particular language which you cannot see used by any other person even from his own community. So there is informal form of language which can be categorized into dialects and idiolects, and there is formal form of language. This formal form of language and informal form of language, or the formal form of language, can be categorized into written form of language and oral form of language. Written form of language always keeps all the grammatical rules and regulations, while you can have some privileges in the case of grammar and structure when you use spoken form of language. And in educational institutions, we always use the formal form of language or the standard form of language. This often creates some clash between the home language of the students and the school language, especially when the students want to learn the second language. Here, the teacher should get a thorough idea on the dialects and idiolects of the students, and he should give due regard to these versions of language spoken by the students when he teaches the second language, so that to correct their functional mistakes in the second language by using the functional items in the dialect. And this is something important in the case of foreign language teaching. Most teachers keep the deficit theory and they neglect the dialects of the students. It should not be there. Students should be encouraged in speaking in their own dialects when they are asked to speak something in the mother tongue. So, these are different forms of language in general. Then, some other forms of language you can tell that in the case of sentences, declarative form of language, then some forms are declarative forms of language, then interrogative forms of language, declarative forms of language, and so on. So you can just if you are asked a question for paragraph, you can include all these items there.